A good example of a problem with democracy as it is implemented in our society is that it ensures that the taxes remain low. And I really mean low. We pay way too little taxes in the Western world. And that's no wonder, because in the end, you are casting your vote on behalf of your wallet. You vote for the candidate that will benefit you the most, which can of course mean a lot of things. But one thing it always means is that a lot of people will never vote for higher taxes. And now that we are in times of crisis, I feel like we should have gained an understanding that this can't continue like this. In the vast majority of countries, there are simply not enough intensive care units. Here's a graph I found online. Now obviously, America is looking like they are performing better than they are in actuality. They do have plenty of intensive care units, but obviously most people will not be able to afford any medical attention, and they will still be dying anyway. So this graph by itself is not yet a reason to celebrate for the Americans actually. But it's interesting to see that theoretically, if America got their shit together, they would easily have the resources to help a lot of their citizens and prevent them from actually dying. But we as Europeans are actually really lacking in the actual healthcare that we are capable of giving. My country, the Netherlands, happens to not be on this graph. But I looked it up. Here we are. We have 6.7 beds for every 100,000 citizens. Obviously that is not enough. Not only is it not enough for the current pandemic, most hospitals didn't quite have enough beds for all the regular patients during the regular flu epidemic we had just 2 years ago. But unfortunately we all forgot about it as soon as it happened. And now we're having a more advanced version of the same problem. And quite a lot of people are literally dying. And all this is really because people don't like paying taxes. For example, my hometown is fairly infamous for the high local taxes. And every year an email circulates that tells you how you can dodge some of the local taxes. But of course we shouldn't. It's technically legal what the email tells you to do, but it's not right. Because our municipality really needs the money. Because there are literally a million things that they need to get fixed but don't have the money for. But people don't seem to care. They just don't want to give up their personal wealth for the common good. Of course, I get that theoretically people can be poor. But here in the Netherlands, where even the minimum wage is really actually quite high, there are very, very few poor people. Sure, there are a lot of people who claim to be poor, but they are usually not actually poor in practice. I have some colleagues who think of themselves as poor, but who at the same time drive luxurious cars and go on luxurious holidays multiple times a year. Personally, I don't think going on holiday is ever a good idea, because you don't need to go on holiday. It is literally a waste of money. But people don't care. If they waste money, they only want to make sure that it is themselves that they waste their money on. Have you looked at mobile phones lately? They showcase this problem very well. Because phones are starting to become progressively more stupid. What do you need a phone with 4 cameras for? Why would you need a foldable screen? You don't, obviously. But nowadays, people have gotten so ridiculously rich, they just seem to have run out of ideas what to spend all their money on. If we just stop doing stuff like that and accepted that the taxes easily can and direly need to go up, maybe the next pandemic will be a lot less bad. Because I can't stress this enough. The people who are in power in Europe at the moment have been cutting their healthcare spending, not because they have been hating healthcare workers in particular. That is not how this problem came to be. It is easy to point to a handful of people and say that they did this. Isn't it lovely if you can make yourself believe that it was a dark lord of sorts that did this? It allows you to run away from your quite obvious responsibility. Because in actuality, we did this. We as society did not want to pay that much taxes, and that is why the government decided they needed to cut their spending. So people would be able to pay less taxes and remain able to go on holiday up to 3 times a year. To northern Italy, for example, to go skiing. Even though skiing is extremely silly and unnecessary. Of course, it is indeed, strictly speaking, our leaders who put us in this mess. I'm not saying that they are not responsible for what they have done. But it is our very own decadence that put those people in power in the first place. We could not bear to sacrifice a bigger portion of our immense personal wealth for the greater good. And that's why those people got in power and were able to make those mistakes for us. Sadly, I won't be surprised if our society would continue to make the very same mistake after all this is over. Because healthcare is not even the only thing that needs more money. At least here in the Netherlands, and I believe it's the same for most of Europe, security and infrastructure are also things that are severely underfunded for the same reason. If we would want a society that is truly prepared for any disaster, the taxes need to be really quite high. And obviously, people are not going to vote for a politician who wants to impose higher taxes on us. Because the universal fairy tale that can be found throughout the Western world is that taxation is theft. With that mindset in mind, I have no high hopes.